you would place to the other sensor to actuate the pump for discharging the liquid soap. And this had an electronic interface circuit which would control the pump and the sensor depending on proximity of your hands to the sensors. And the second one was foot operated, whereby you would have a pedal and a rod linkage and lever, and these are connected by bolts and tension springs, and together would operate once the user presses the pedal, and you'll have two systems, one for driving the spring-loaded water tap, and another for driving the liquid dispensing bottle. The second one was in varieties, such that we had a single station for, let's say, fewer users. We would have a double station for extended user, and a multi-station of up to 12 stations for multitude of people to wash their hands at a time. Oh, sorry. Oh. Next, please. So the automatic is the one which is seen there with the black spots, which are the infrared sensors. And you can see a bottle of the liquid soap and the tank, which would contain 250 liters. So you can see several people can wash for quite a time without finishing the water. And the other technologies, the mechanical ones, are those shown there. You can see that one there with a one station for washing the hands, and you can see those with the multi-washing stations. And as we were coming along, you managed to see one installed outside the library. Apart from this, we had the other interventions, not only the hand washing. Next, please. So we also had another machine or device, and this was a sanitizing booth, which basically used a microprocessor controller with sensors, infrared sensors, and the nozzle. So what the machine would do, would atomize the liquid sanitizer and spray it automatically to the person who is passing through the booth. And this machine could store up to 20 liters, and you would use about 5 liters averagely for 10 hours. And the last one I would like to also mention about, and which is still in development, expected to be completed this June, is an electromechanical ventilator. And this is a machine to assist people with difficulty in breathing. These ventilators are very expensive, and the basic one, without the automatic features, sells at about 25 million. So we decided to pioneer on this so that we can come up with an electromechanical ventilator, but an affordable one. With this prototype, we are expecting to use slightly above 10 million. And when we go into mass production, we expect the price will lower. And you can see the development is still going on. You can see the devices which we are about to install inside the inside the packaging. And you can see we are doing some simulation. You can see the yellow sign on top. That is the pressure of the air which is going to the human lungs. And you can see the one with red, the red signal, that is the flow rate, and the one with the bluish color is the tidal volumes, and many other features as the clinician would require. So these are the interventions on the technological innovations with regard to COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, the model. Thank you all for you.
So now let us hear from a counterpart pioneer on this area of innovation, and that is Joshua. Karibu.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. As I was introduced by the moderator, my name is Mr. Joshua Zakaria Mueller, and I come from the Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering inside the COIT. I have specialized in the textile and apparel science and technology. So I'm here to present one of the innovation that we also did with our colleagues to come up with the mask in response to the COVID-19. Unfortunately, I couldn't see the slide here. I wonder if the technical team could help me. And by the way, I'm here on behalf of Dr. Pendo Bigambo. She could not be here with us today. Well, thank you. I hope we are aware that during the COVID-19, 2019 to 2020, it was announced by different ministries as well as the World Health Organizations and the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, that the people in the world should now leave the medical mask to the health workers and the people who are at the front line saving other people's life. They were categorized as a highly risked group, and therefore this is what happened, and that's why the medical mask fell short in supply. In response to that, the University of Dar es Salaam did a research in the textile section, the Department of Mechanical and Industrial, together with the TDTC people, to come up with this mask, which was named as a high-tech reusable face mask. Next, please. Oh, thank you. Next, please. Could you click it again? Yes. So according to different health ministries and the World Health Organization, the virus is primarily transferred from one person, an infected person, to the next person through the fluids. See, if you're talking, if you're speaking, if you're breathing, if you cough, if you sneeze, you're releasing moisture, air, which is called respiratory droplets, or the aerosols. And normally, the air that you're exhaling, it contains the moisture. So it was reported that the viruses are contained in that moisture. So what actually happens is that if you put in a mask and then you're talking, that means you're preventing that moisture from running out of your mouth and your nose. That means you're saving somebody else's life. And that's the reason now the mask, we had to come up with the mask. Next, please. So this is the mask that we came up with. So the mask had three different layers, where every layer in here played its role in preventing that fluid from coming out of the mouth and the nose to contact someone else. So the mask itself has got 3 layers. You can see there the outer fabric, the inner fabric, which is the white fabric, and the intermediate layer. The intermediate layer is found between these two layers. And we had a number of tests, the number of trials in lab. So the materials that we came up with exhibited strong performances. And this is what actually made the researchers to come up to choose these 3 different materials. And you can see there I've put different properties. The density. When we are talking about the density, we mean the number of threads per centimeter of the fabric. You see, so that means it was very tight. Those fabrics were very tight. You see, and the other the intermediate fabric were a lightweight, non-woven fabric made of the span bond technology. So the 2 fabrics, the outer and the inner, they were made from woven technology, the weaving technology. That means they were woven fabric. But the intermediate one, which acted as a filter, to filter that moisture, it was a span bond technology. So a normal fabric, the one I'm wearing, the jacket I'm wearing, it is called a woven fabric. That means it has just been made by the interlacement of the threads, just like this, up and down. And you can see there's still some holes that you can see between my fingers. So this is what happened. Therefore, in order to enhance the efficiency of these fabrics, we have to reinforce with another fabric. So next, please. So these are the factors that were considered. These are the factors that were considered in the selection of the materials. The first one is called the porosity of the materials. That means the size of the pores, Porosity means that space which is found between the fibers that are making the threads. This is a fabric. It was once threads that were interlaced like this one. Those threads, they went from fibers, the raw materials. Inside the fibers, there are spaces between one fiber and another fiber. So we had to check those sizes, the porosity of the materials. So you can see those are the images from the polarizing microscope that we had to check. See the image number A, it is the outer fabric. The outer fabric. If you're wearing that mask, there is outer fabric, which is actually facing somebody else. And then the B is the inner fabric, which is facing a wearer. And the intermediate fabric, which is C. So now the combination, D means the combination of the outer and the intermediate layers. You could see that they were significantly reduced. The size of the pores were significantly reduced by reinforcing, by putting together the A and C. So we got D. You can see there are still some holes that could allow somebody to breathe comfortably, but those moisture were filtered. According to the WHO, if you filter the moistures, that means you're filtering, you're preventing that virus, because the virus are carried inside that moisture. Another factor was the moisture management. The outer layer, which is A, has a hydrophobicity, we say. It has got fear to water. I'm concluding, please. So the outer fabric, that means if somebody has a breath, that moisture, when it gets in onto that fabric, it will dry easily. But the inner layer has got a hydrophilicity. That means it absorbs moisture. If I'm speaking, I want to feel comfortable. That means that moisture will not be contained inside my mask. It will be taken out in the intermediate layer. It will be retained there. The moisture absorption, the property of the materials. Another one was the filtration efficiency and the fitting and shape, aesthetic. We wanted people to love this mask, to buy this mask for the client. So if you're wearing it, you want to feel good. And therefore, the aesthetic was one of the factors that were considered. Next, please. We're about to wind up. These are the processes. After all the lab work, we had to go now to the sewing lab to make, to tailor, to sew the mask. At the end of the day, the masks were packed with the poly bags to prevent them from contacting any external materials. Next, please, to sum up. All right, so the 3 different layers of the fabric were used, each layer being responsible for the prevention of penetration of the aerosols containing the viruses. The intermediate layer played a great role by filtering the moisture. The size of the viruses, as you can see, that's the size of the viruses contained in the fluids. Therefore, the more you prevent that fluids, then the more you prevent the viruses from being transmitted from one person to the next person. The science and technology of the clothing is changing every day. Things are changing, and therefore, this is an ongoing research. We are still in the lab. We are still working hard to improve the efficiency of this mask. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joshua, for this inspiring presentation. And I think I could see some of the viewers, listeners, they were dancing with the way you were presenting. Thank you very much. Now, may I take this opportunity to call upon the panelist, Dr. Bernard Mueller from Mbeya College of Medicine. I think that College of Medicine is under the University of Dar es Salaam, to come and make a presentation. I've warned him before he comes here that he reduce the tone of your jargons, medical jargons, so that we can take the entire population of this audience together. We have diverse of knowledge, sociologists, engineers, and et cetera, et cetera. So try to go down with the medical language. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. As the moderator has introduced me, my name is Dr. Bernard Mueller. I'm coming from the University of Dar es Salaam, Mbeya College of Health and Allied Sciences. Professionally, by profession, I'm a medical doctor, and I'm an epidemiologist. And you could see in the 2020, when the pandemic came out in our community, everybody was talking about epidemiology. Now, as an epidemiologist, I noticed that the college was closed in 2020, and the students were asked to go home. But really, it was interesting. There were a group of 20 students who came to my office and said, Dr. Ben, let's use epidemiology that you've been teaching us and see what we can do to save the community. So what we did, we tried to think about the use of a signal. A signal is some sort of a message that will always occur when you see a group of people are presenting with abnormal features or signs and symptoms that might define a certain disease. And so in this particular aspect this afternoon, I'm going to present to you the patterns of lower respiratory tract infections, which gives us a signal of maybe how big was the disease, or how big is the disease in our country. I don't know how can I go with this now. Okay, good. Right. So basically, the lower respiratory tract infections comprises of an array of diseases. You might be heard of pneumonia, bronchitis, or bronchiolitis. These are all infections of the respiratory system from the vocal cords to the lung parenchyma. And today, as we are speaking, this group of diseases, they actually they present a prevalence of about 11 million people every year are reported by the WHO. And not only that, we are talking about death tolls of about 2.7 million people each year are dying of lower respiratory tract infection. But not only that, there are about 103 people globally who are actually living with a disability due to lower respiratory tract infections. So the question is, we tend to see a lot of people in the region of Mbeya who are dying of lower respiratory tract infection, where all these people are having some sort of infections, COVID, influenza, or whatsoever. And so we came up to see how best we define the disease, and we try to see the magnitude by using the signs and symptoms. One of the main technical clinical parameter is actually the presentation of coagulation. Many patients with viral infections that are presenting with lower respiratory tract infection tend to present with hypercoagulability of the blood. The blood tends to clot. And in one way or another, the COVID-19 presented with higher level of hypercoagulability. We talked about the platelet counts tends to be higher, and the clots, small packets of blood, will always occlude in the vessels of the brain and the lung, what's so-called the phenomena we call the pulmonary embolism. So in this particular scenario, we decided to come with a study trying to understand the hematological patterns of the patients that are presenting with COVID-19. One of you might ask me, how did you know, Dr. Ben? Did you confirm that these patients were COVID? I would say no. Testing one patient for COVID PCR is about $100 US, 200,000 Tanzanian shilling, laki mbili. Wangapi wangeweza kuafford? So what we thought is the use of the idea of a hematological pattern, the hypercoagulability, to check all patients who are presenting with lower respiratory tract infection and how best we can learn from that particular pattern. So what we did, we used an army of students. These 20 students were trained based on how best to interview patients that are presenting in 6 hospitals of Mbeya. 2 of them being health centers, 2 of them again being district hospitals, 1 of them regional hospital, and a tertiary referral teaching hospital, Mbeya Zonal Referral Hospital. So the students were interviewing these people if they had some symptoms of cough, joint pain, headache, or difficulties in breathing. But at the end of the day, we tried to check among those who are coughing, how many of them presented with a dry cough. And the theory and the literature has already guided us before that patients with COVID, the typical presentation of cough is dry cough. And those ones caused by bacteria, in most cases, tend to produce the wet cough. So we try to check on how best we can check the ESR and hematological pattern, taking the blood into the lab, and then see what are the pictures of the blood that might give us from these particular patients. So there were a number, of course, of other additional patterns, symptoms that we studied. But in all, we noticed that in a group of 534 patients that were studied, majority of them, about 57.9 were females. But strikingly, the most reported respiratory complaint were coughing. But additionally, there were others like fever by almost 68%, and then chest pain, body weakness, and joint pain, which all of them confirmed to the suspicion of COVID-19. There were in fact, other features, other symptoms like wheezing that could exclude this group of people that maybe we are dealing with asthma, and other group of symptoms like night sweat that give us a clue maybe we could be dealing with tuberculosis. So one of the other key finding actually was about, we were interested to see among these people how many of them are overcrowded in their household. We noticed that most of the household presented with 4 to 7 members in the household, with extremes of about 21 people in the household. But there were nothing of any association among these. And if you look at the patterns of the other symptoms, as I said before, wheezing and the night sweat were not in that particular pattern of interest that we see. We studied the distribution of the facilities and then tried to see maybe we might be dealing with the disease. What we noticed is that there were actually an association between the distribution of the facility, the intensity of the people attended in this particular facility. The most risks were presented in the zonal tertiary teaching hospital, followed by Mbeya Regional Referral Hospital, Kiwanja Mpaka, Rwanda, and other 2 health centers. And in fact, this significance was very significant, but the most risky were the topmost 3, which were very overcrowded. And we tried to also review the effect of non-communicable diseases. I am sure that most of you must at some point of time could hear about the effect of diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, hypertension. And they were saying many people aged more than 60 with non-communicable diseases were presenting with a risk. So we tried to check if there are actually association with non-communicable disease. And indeed, many people with obesity presenting with association of COVID suspicion in terms of the dry cough. And when we look at hypertension and cardiovascular, we did not know why we didn't see any association. And at some point we were wondering, maybe we are not dealing with the disease. But again, when we look at the effect of other respiratory diseases which are not infectious, we could find actually there were interesting patterns of association. So ladies and gentlemen, if you look at these particular patterns, one could see actually there were existing literatures from Italy, from America, from Germany, from China, that were actually giving us a clue that actually majority of these particular patients we were suspecting them at high level index. But when we come to the, I'm winding up. But when we come to the hematological pattern, interesting, we could see the white cell level. The white cells is a signal for any infection. The total white cell, if your doctor is asking you to take the full blood picture, will always be elevated if you are infected with any type of infection. But most importantly, if you have got a viral infection, the lymphocyte will tend to be elevated. And so what was striking, we could find that the levels of the lymphocyte were elevated in most of our cases. And most patients with the lymphocytes were actually associated with COVID suspicion, talking about the dry cough. So what does this tell us? Indeed, I would say we were still worried that it might not be giving us any clue, because already lymphocytes could mean maybe influenza or any other type of oral respiratory tract infection. But when we checked to the association of the platelet, really, there was an association of about, we're talking about an adjusted odd ratio of about 125. We're talking about a patient with platelets counts of, those with high platelet counts, they were most likely to have the disease at a risk, maybe at the frequency of about 125, which means actually the patterns of the disease that were presented might not be the true case. Yes, one can argue and can say, why were all these patients not hospitalized in the ICU? But the question is...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So,
yes.
So the issue is, it's not about the difficulty in breathing. What is it all about? The additional high platelet counts were giving us a clue that the burden of disease could be higher. The reported burden is about the Kenya compared to Tanzania. The Kenyan one is 9 times compared to Tanzania. So what does it tell us? Really, we think that we could come up.
I think you'll get more time when you receive questions. Your conclusion will be featured. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that presentation, which is looking the disease in epidemiological point of view. Now, may I try to balance, though it was not balanced. In terms of gender, it was not balanced. May I try to balance by calling Dr. Florence Kiaruzi. She will be coming here to talk about students' perception of teacher support on home-based assessment packages for learning during COVID-19 school closure in Tanzania. Hey, as I said, this was one of the challenging issues to parents, whether they were college students or they were pupils and etc. Because we find ourselves in a scenario of supporting teachers to reach our children. Karibu sana.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Sorry, moderator, a point of correction. I'm Dr. Conrada Haule, and I worked with my colleagues on this project, Dr. Florence Kiaruzi and Dr. Innocent Rugambuka, and I from Dar es Salaam University College of Education, DUSE, Department of Education, Education Psychology and Curriculum Studies. So, as we are aware that the impact of COVID-19 touched everywhere, including the education sector, and as our students were required to stay home as part of the measures to prevent further spread of the disease. So then the schools, the teachers thought of what will happen. Students are at home, their parents are not teachers, time is flying, and from the time the announcement was made, nobody was aware of when now the schools are going to reopen. So what will happen then? So they thought of different ways how to handle the situation. how to find alternative. Please, next, please. So the thought was thinking of the alternative way of making learners still connected towards the school or making them connected towards their learning. Different approaches were used by different organizations. Some of the institutions, they opted on online learning, but one of these measures was the use of home-based assessment packages for learning. What does this mean? The home-based assessment packages for learning, it was an alternative mode of learning which helped learners to learn while they are at home under minimal supervision of the parents. Under minimal supervision of the parents, and it involved different activities like they were given some of the reading materials, some of the books, and some of the questions to attempt to work on it. The modality of how the schools shared these materials with the students differed depending on the institution. Some of them, they preferred to send it in a certain stationery where the parents picked it up, but in some schools where they had some advancement in technology, at least they uploaded the material in their website, or they shared through social media like WhatsApp groups, where parents collected the tasks and then shared it to their children for continuous learning. Principally, these packages, they can't serve as the formative assessment. Now, so as this package to serve this formative assessment role, it's very important that it is designed in such a way it can help the learner, even the parents who are working closely with the learners, to determine first where this learner is, where this learner is supposed to go, and how or what should be done so that learner can reach where he or she is supposed to go. And it was very important that teachers should work very seriously on making sure that the task itself is of high quality. So to the side of the teachers, they had to prepare these packages or these tasks of high quality, meaning that the tasks which could be easily understood by the learners, remember, these tasks are done by the learners while the teachers are not there, and these learners, they are used to this conventional style of learning. Now they are learning while they are at home. The environment itself is not a school. So they had to think of how they can make these tasks of high quality, but also the nature of feedback they can provide to these learners so that it can further their learning, but also the way how they could support their autonomy. It was very important because it was to encourage more of the self-directed learning among learners. So now we think, okay, for any program to be successful, one part of it, we think of how it is prepared, how it is implemented, but for this part, also we thought it is important how these learners are accepting it, how learners, they are taking it. So we thought it was important that we can focus our study also to see on how learners perceived the support from the teachers in terms of the support from the teachers in the quality of the task itself, on the side of the feedback given by the teachers, but also on the side of how the task itself promoted their autonomy in learning. So basically, we addressed that. We studied on how students perceived the support from the teachers in terms of the three aspects: the quality of the task itself, the quality of the feedback, but also how the task supported their autonomy. Also, we wanted to respond to the question to check if these perceptions differed across gender or across school category, meaning from those private from government schools or non-government schools. Our sample, our study, we conducted a study in Dar es Salaam region. We involved 60 schools, and these schools were both non-government and government with almost equal representation, 50-50. Of course, the non-government contributed about 49% and the government 50%, but also gender representation for the boys and girls to the part of students, it was almost equal. That one was 49 for male and 51 for boys. Yes, I'm there now. So our findings, we found that students had positive perception on the teacher support on all aspects, starting with the aspect of the quality of the task itself, but also to the aspect of the feedback, the quality of the feedback, and the autonomy. Considering how it differed across gender, there was no significant difference between gender, that boys and girls had almost similar higher perception of the teacher support. But on the side of school category, we observed that in two aspects, that on the aspect of the quality of the task and on the aspect of the quality of the feedback, both government and non-government, they reported higher perception. But on the aspect of autonomy support, then we found at least some of, yes. So there was a significant difference in terms of reporting the autonomy, favoring the government schools, where these students reported that they were more autonomous while doing these activities than those from the non-government schools. Also, we wanted also to test if these findings have got any relationship with the efficacy of these students in mathematics subject. And basically, our thought was, because it is reported through studies that self-efficacy is a very important predictor of students' performance, so we thought it is important not just to end up there learning their perception of how teachers they support them. We wanted also to see if there's any relationship with the efficacy. And based on that model, yes, it was found that all three aspects of teacher support was significantly was related with student self-efficacy in mathematics. Then basically, we recommend from our findings that because students perceived that those tasks were very important, then it is better for teachers to integrate the kind of tasks to their day-to-day learning activities. But also, because we didn't find any gender difference, we thought that these kind of tasks are very important to address existing gender gaps in education and the like, because our students, regardless of their being female or male, they will have an equal opportunity to learn. But also we say if they are effectively implemented or if effectively used even broadly, then we hope these packages could improve learning in mathematics. Thank you.
Now may I call upon Joshua, if you can move to this chair here. I'll be standing throughout. How many of you, when you were in secondary school, when you find a teacher of mathematics is coming to class, you find a way of getting out of the class? How many of you? Yeah, mathematics is challenging, eh? So, I think from these diverse presentations, you have heard different corners, different perspectives of COVID-19, how it was addressed in our society, and definitely being listeners and viewers of this from these presentations come from diverse disciplines. I think if we say economic importance of COVID-19 in any discipline, including engineering, that question could be tackled effectively. And I hope that question will be coming very soon in your exams. So we have reached a point whereby you may have some issues to be clarified from the panelists. You have 6 of them here. You can shoot those questions to get more clarification. Welcome. We start there, and then we will follow.
Thank you very much, sir. I would like to understand one thing. How can you get effective teaching pertaining to COVID-19 in non-government secondary school in Tanzania? Thank you very much.
You have got the question. Okay, so jot it down. I'll pick randomly about 3 to 5 questions, and then I'll ask the panel to respond. Maybe there. There was somebody who raised the area here, and then we will follow you. Okay?
Thank you. My name is Bernard Mueller. I'm coming from political science and public administration. I have 2 questions, and one goes to Dr. Mgina. Now, depending on the presentation, it is obvious that you found the traditional measures taken by Tanzanians not only affordable but also working. But in your presentation, you've said that you are working with the Ministry of Health to facilitate and go on with the Fukiza, Utanol, and other measures that you have been taking. Now, my question is, now, why is it that the ministry is now mainly concerned with the vaccines from abroad and not encouraging the traditional medicine, such as the Fukiza Udanol? And the other question goes to Mr. Joshua Mole. Recently, it was reported that the South African industry, the established industry for production of vaccines, was in a high risk of being closed due to the lack of the acknowledgement from the World Health Organizations, but also lacking orders from various countries for usage. Now, what precautions do you wish to take in the products that are inventing so that your hardware won't go to waste?
Maybe gentleman there.
Thank you, Chair, for the exciting session. My name is Chumbak from Humanities, and I have a couple of questions. One go to Dr. Mgina. Thank you, Doctor, for the quite exciting presentation. My concern is about the intangibility of the traditional medicine. From the society I come from, you might all know the plants, but not everybody can dispense that plants to cure a particular disease. But a person who has inherited that particular knowledge so far, there is some kind of intangibility in there. And I wonder whether that was part of what you were researching on or not. The second question goes to Joshua. And if I got correctly, it seems while the Western universities, like in the UK and the US, were very busy in the laboratory doing experiments to discover vaccines and all that. Our cohort was very busy working on the face masks, more or less the same as different women and men in Kariako and somewhere else. What are your views on that concern? The third one goes to all the panelists, and this concerns about communicating medical issues from the professional point of view. And my question is, how can you communicate the right knowledge regarding a pandemic like COVID when the political regime is not in favor of what should be communicated. I can't cite more example from Tanzania. And the last one, which also goes to the entire group, thanks Benny for seeing you there, is about COVID-19 testing. I suspect this was more of income generation rather than the real testing. I can cite one example in 2020 when I had a trip to Uganda, Rwanda, and then Burundi in a circle. And the money I spent to do testing within a few hours of one after another was more or less twice a ticket I paid for that trip. What would you say if somebody says the government spend a lot of time and a lot of resources to collect people's money instead of helping them solve COVID problems? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can respond with those 3 questions. Do you have something to say from the educational perspective, particularly addressing disparity between the private and public in terms of responding to the pandemic?
Yes, the question was particularly how we can help learners in secondary schools, particularly from private to learn, in case they experience that. Our study focused on primary school, but that can be borrowed also to other levels of education because it depends on the nature of tasks teachers can design, and these learners, they have that added advantage that they are more matured. Then the issue of being self-directed learning, then that could be even more easier. So we suggest it's better if they can use also they can use that assessment packages for learning, that they can opt for that distant mode of learning in case of the pandemic again.
Thank you very much. Maybe if there is another response from the group. Because there were 3 questions. Yes, you can respond. Yes.
Thank you, Coordinator. I want to respond to some 2 questions that were directed to me. And the first question was about vaccination and traditional medicine. Now, our intervention on the traditional medicine is on issue of cure. So whenever you have a disease, vaccination is part, and these 2 go sometimes together. But in the beginning, of course, we didn't have a vaccine, and we didn't have actually a standard cure. So what is happening now is that while it is not really seen that the traditional medicine is being given the publicity that was, but in fact is still going on. As I can tell you, the Ministry of Health is still continuing that. There is a inventory that is being done to see, to survey all the researches that has been done on traditional medicine and medicinal plants, but also there are also some clinical studies which are being done as we speak by the Ministry of Health, and hence they are still working on the 2 things together. So the Ministry of Health has not abandoned traditional medicine or that one in any case. Another question was about intangibility and all this. Now, in our case, what we did is to ask around different tribes what type of plants they are using. So we are not focusing on the traditional healer, what he is doing, but we are looking only at the plant that they are using. And what we saw is that when we go, for example, to Bukoba, we go to Singida, we go to Arusha, these are different plants, different species, but then there was a consistent of certain chemicals that are found in those plants. That's where we focus as scientists, and what we look is what is there about these compounds which is common with COVID. So that was our approach. Thank you.
Just to add on that area on traditional medicine, I think one of the results which were shared here was the fact that that follow-up of patients who received the conventional medical products and the traditional medicine products. And the two groups, what was found is those who received the conventional medical products, and another group which received the conventional plus the traditional. The outcome was better in this group which it is. That result was shared even to the Minister of Health. So the Minister of Health is very, very keen to ensure that traditional medicine is complementing the conventional medicine, but also it is to complement using all scientific limits, within the scientific limits. That's why you can hear there are a lot of research on traditional medicine. Maybe if there is, yes, this one.
Hello. Thank you so much. I would like to respond to the questions. I mean, he's worrying about the fact that the South African company, the vaccine manufacturers, are about to shut down the production. And if I understood very well, he's worrying that this virus would come up with the same energy that it came up before, right? So what is our precautions, and what are we doing right now to make sure that this mask is going out there? Well, even though we are producing at the lab scale now, but we can still manufacture for different institutions. We have also supplied to different public and private institutions upon the receipt of the order, and therefore we can still manufacture when the need arises. So we are still at the front line, even though, as I've said, the production that we had before, we were running it in the lab scale. So the capacity was not that big, but upon the order, I mean, we are ready to help the community. That is my answer for that. The second question, moderator, the candidate asked that while others in the USA, they were busy coming up with the vaccines and all that, the College of Engineering and Technology at the University of Dar es Salaam were busy tailoring the mask using the fabric like anybody else at Kariakoo. Well, that's a very good question and really challenging. What I would like to respond here is that the idea of coming up with the fabric mask was due to the fact that the different ministries, health ministries across the world, including the Ministry of Health in our country, also the World Health Organization, the CDC, announced that we should save the medical mask for the people who are at the high risk, including the health workers who are always at the front line saving other people's lives, the nurses and the doctors. We had to do that. And therefore, in response to that, the University of Dar es Salaam had to sit down the number of researchers in the textile section to come up with an alternative mask. But the difference is why this mask had been baptized as a high-tech reusable face mask. It is a high-tech, as you have heard from my presentation, that we had to go through a number of researches. It has gone through a number of tests to see the porosity, the pores which are found in a normal fabric, and see how we could reinforce, we could put it together with a filter, which is coming from the non-woven span bond materials. See, other people, a lot of people are just using the normal fabric, probably from the kanga, the kitenge, the kikoi, etc. But even if you use that, we thought that the efficiency couldn't be that much bigger to help somebody preventing himself from being contacted the viruses. And that's the reason we had to combine with the the non-woven filter. You see, the difference between the normal fabric, which is the woven, the one I'm wearing, and this fabric which is coming from the span-bond technology is that the fabric, the normal fabric like the kanga, the people are using, are just made from the interlacement of the thread, just like you can see. So there are still some holes. But the filter that we put in the intermediate layer of the mask came from the span-bond technology. That means those fibers, the materials, the raw materials of the textiles, they were pressed, they were bonded together mechanically, thermally, or by using heat. And most of the times, I mean, everywhere in the world, the span-bond made material, these materials are coming from the span-bond technologies, are normally used as the filters. They are filters. They can help to filter. That means you can be able to breathe normally, but that moisture wouldn't come out to affect somebody else.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Joshua.
Thank
Very
you.
interesting when you hear about the fibers and so
All right.
forth.
So it's
Maybe-
not the one like you said that people are just putting two fabrics together and making and sew them. Even though we appreciate everybody's effort into to fight against this pandemic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua. I think it was one of the questions, it was stimulating question to the panelists, saying while the others, they were concentrating on vaccine production, inventing vaccine, and we were concentrating on masks like in Kariako. It was a stimulating question, but let me say that all these are countermeasures against COVID-19. None is maybe said to be superior than the other. They complement each other. They complement each other. Maybe I take this opportunity to ask Professor Muganyis from Mbeya College of Medicine, principal of Mbeya College of Medicine. Maybe he can have something to say about responding to the same question about why the others were concentrating on inventing vaccine, we were concentrating on producing masks. I think we also tried to do some work on trying to come up with our version of Tanzania vaccine. Maybe you can say something, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Maybe most of this, what I will be talking from my own point of view, yes. And I should not be quoted as an official report. But what I understand, when COVID-19 pandemic was reported, the first reaction all across the world was panic. And people, the different populations, took whatever they could do in order to prevent the disease. In our culture, in our countries, where the industry, vaccine industry is not so powerful, we had to resort to our traditional ways. And even the ways we used it to respond to COVID reaction is different from the industrialized countries. I would not regret to see that Tanzania did not emphasize on the scientific point of view, but as well as reasoning, the common reasoning. It is just like if you have someone going to fetch food at the market, and all of a sudden there is rain coming. And then you bring the ones who are going to the market back into a room and they close them right there, while you don't know when this rain will stop. You don't know what you can supply them in order to go on and fetch food for the families. So what we did right from the beginning was the right thing, because there was no vaccine. If you lock someone in a room from exposure, if you get exposed slightly, you develop immunity. And then you approach herd immunity after time. But if you close yourself inside a room, there is a stress, and the stress will further lower immunity. So it is not surprising that in many countries where the lockdown was undertaken, the people were most affected than the countries where lockdown was not undertaken. But that came out by intuition, maybe. It's not from it's not something that we expected. It's because we did not afford to apply what we did. But that was the right thing from the point of view. Now, coming back to the vaccine, I'm again not regretting that our communities resorted to our traditional ways of treating disease. And it's not surprising that the concoction that we were using, they are very effective, because most of these mixtures, they have the properties of thinning blood. They prevent blood clotting. They prevent inflammation. They have proven effect, like tangawizi, bizari, piripiri, all these have those characteristics. They are proven. And this is the way, from the pathogenesis point of view, or pathology point, how COVID causes problems is through causing all these problems. So probably what we did had some impact on what we see. It's just that we don't have money and the resources to test our mixtures that we were using. Probably they were better than the vaccines that we see from the West. It's not that, it's because that we have not proven them scientifically. So this is what I can say. Now, the modern vaccine, in Tanzania we are somewhere also not behind in the modern vaccine, I think. I'm informed, well informed, that the vaccine, the first vaccine from Tanzania will come out not very long ago. Because and this kind of vaccine may be simpler to use, easy and very cheap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mugani. Just to highlight the issue of vaccine, maybe as a moderator, I'm one of those who tested the local medicine, the local vaccine, which is now undergoing human trial. I took 2 jabs at least, via my nose. I took 2 jabs via my nose, and it is now under the human trial. It has passed all the animal trials, now it is on human trials, and I think they are going well with that trial. Maybe if I can collect some other questions. There's one there.
Thank you very much, sir. COVID-19, it is the point of fact. It is not the point of law. So, as researchers, tell me, how can you convince the country as Tanzania as it is, so as to maintain the point of law rather than the point of fact? Thank you very much.
Okay, another question? Yes.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Dennis Todori Mwalongo. I'm a member of PSPA. I had a question to Mr. Joshua Morel. It's just, I wanted to know, the masks are reusable. Now, I wanted to know if you wash the masks, or as itself, since you talked about the intermediate layer where the moisture gets absorbed. Now, is it that if the moisture gets absorbed, then like it dries up, or like I have to wash it so as I could reuse it? Thank you.
Another question? Yes. We start there, and then we follow.
Thank you very much. I'm Thomas Marando from Mbeya College of Health and Allied Sciences. My question goes to Dr. Mgina, and I don't remember his name, but he's from Kuwait. So, and also it's in line with the previous question, that you have a mask. Did you do any research that, because now it's about preventing the virus from entering, and did you check whether you are preventing from someone breathing properly, because this is very important too. And how long should this mask be, I mean, because we are breathing moistures. So after how long will this middle layer or the inner layer will be wet so that it need to be washed, okay? So we need data on that. Regarding to Dr. Mgina's presentation, last week I was at a NIMBRI conference in town here in Dar es Salaam, and I visited this pavilion from Traditional Medicine, Institute for Traditional Medicine, and they have this NIMBRI calf, they have other drugs, traditional drugs, like for treating cancer and whatnot, and I asked them a question. The problem with these traditional medicines, we do not have proper data. This is something that is really lacking. Even preclinical data, just simply go to cell culture lab and test on cells and tell us this is our data that shows this is a drug against COVID-19. And mind you, COVID-19 is not ending. It will be coming, I mean, there will be an outbreak like flu in Western countries. So to get prepared, I know all the measures that we took, it was just for, we were like panicked, as the previous presenter said. It was just a panic. Now, as an academic institution, research institution, we really need to collaborate. If someone will work on other parts, for instance, the issue of masks. Remember in Japan, when the pandemic started, they had people from IT also telling us for how long when you cough, when you're doing coughing, how long those droplets can go. And this is how they came up that 1 meter, we say like this social distance, okay? So we really need now to sit down, go properly, stage 1 to the next, like research steps, and give us, I mean, and tell the community that this is the proper way. Our mask is working.
Thank you very much
thank
for
you.
your question. Maybe we hand the mic to that gentleman there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Simon Tebi from Sociology. I have two questions. One goes to the first and second panelists. We know that every approach to fighting COVID-19 has both positive and negative aspects. And from these presentations, we hear much about the positive aspects of traditional healing. What could be the negative effects of using traditional healing in fighting COVID-19, and how are they framed in the current regime? The second question goes to the general. Given that now Tanzania has had multiple responses, we began with traditional healing, and then now we are combining with vaccine. What could developed nations learn from Tanzanian experience?
Thank
Thank you.
you very much. Maybe my panel, you can start. Maybe I start here now.
Thank you so much, moderator. There was a question about the washability of the mask, the washability. Yes, this mask is washable. He asked that we have said that this is reusable. So is it a self-washed mask or someone has to wash it? Yes, someone has to wash it. In our packages, we have put an instruction for the users that once you have wear it, and when you take it out, then you have to wash it with warm water, and then you have to press it with an iron tool. And then when it gets dry, then you can still put it on. The second question was about the middle layer. How many times that you have to wash it? Does the middle layer withstand the washing rigors, isn't it? Yeah. Yes, we have tested, and the middle layer withstanded up to 5 number of washes. And therefore, this mask, you have to wash it up to 5 number of washes. And then once you have reached it to that maximum number, then we recommend that you have to find another one. In the packages, we have also put 2 masks, the 2 mask, it's a pair. So if you get this mask, in the packages, there are two. That means throughout your movements, when you wear one mask and you feel that it's a little bit awkward, then you need to take another one, to wear another one. Oh, thank you. I hope I've responded.
Maybe next.
Thank you, moderator. I'd like to respond to the question about doing research and collecting data. Of course, you're right, then we need to have enough data. And what I can tell you is that during of course, the height of the pandemic and up to today, the Fukiza UDANOL has been able to generate quite a lot of funds. From an initial investment of 10 million, now is running about 200 million or something. And we are allowed to use this money now to back for the research. What we have to do now is to do some more clinical tests in the Fukiza itself, but also I have to tell the speaker that quite a good number of the compounds that are found in these essential oils have already been researched on. Their activities are known, toxicities and everything. So at least we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but of course then we'll have now to test the formulation as a whole and generate enough data for that one. In the second question about negative, one thing about the negative about the traditional medicine is the issue of dosage. How is the dosage being determined? There are doctors in here. We know in every case that a medicine is also a poison at the same time. Depends. It's a medicine at a certain dose in low, but if it is a high dose, then it could be a poison. So you have to establish that one. But now the Ministry of Health has a special project that is currently being done at the Sokoine University, whereby now they are trying to look at this one. The traditional healers cannot do it because it is a bit expensive. So the preclinicals now are being done in order to actually address this. And we are borrowing this from actually Uganda. Uganda, from the Ministry of Health of Uganda, they chose some three plants which were used against malaria, and worked with the Makerere University to actually establish the dose for those traditional medicine, because they are being used widely in Uganda. So the same thing has been borrowed here in Tanzania, and the Ministry of Health is following that. And nowadays, the traditional healers in the country have been called to volunteer, bringing their products so that they can be tested and so that the dosage and other things can be determined. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe, brother?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, moderator. I have to explain why I'm not talking on behalf of the Ministry of Health, but because I am also part of that group that is working. So we're working with the Ministry of Health in that, as a scientist. And as I said before, it's because COVID brought us together.
Thank you, moderator. And on my side, I'd like to respond on the second question of Dr. Simon Mtebi on what developed countries can learn from the preventive measures against pandemics like COVID-19 from Tanzania. Maybe what I can say that we all know that Tanzania adopted a little bit a different path from the other countries, especially the developed countries, in regard to dealing with the COVID-19. Take an example, the issue of lockdown. In Tanzania, we didn't have the lockdown issue. And we saw later on, even the developed countries also decided to have a different approach towards lockdown issues. So what I can say that from what Tanzania did in regard to COVID-19, it teaches even other countries that there is always multiple ways of facing a particular problem depending on different factors, especially even the socio-economic context. Remember, maybe take an example, can you imagine what could happen if Tanzania could adopt it to the issue of lockdown while
It is people depend on going outside daily to search for anything to bring on the table. So in one way, and you can see even the prevalence of COVID-19 and the severity and the impact is, you would see from the statistics that were given by WHO, the prevalence of the disease in relation to what was done by Tanzania. So there is something to learn. Even on the issue of traditional medicine, maybe the issues that keeping on researching to see on the efficacy and the efficiency of those traditional medicine, maybe they would be improved more and more so that they can be used for the benefit of the Tanzanians and many other people, maybe even those from the developed countries. Because even those from the developed countries, there are also some medicines that are made from herbs or from plants and many other herbal medicines. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to add, I think there were two questions from Dr. Ichumbaki that were not, I think I could add something on those. I think he asked about the diagnostics, and he mentioned at some point maybe there were business elements, or there are business elements in the diagnostics. And again, he asked a tricky question. How do you fight COVID while the regulation, in one way or another, might not allow you to do so in 100%? And I think the gentleman in front over here echoed the same question. So I just want to put a clarity. A team of researchers at Muhimbili University, they were conducting a study on comparing patients with COVID-19 and those without COVID-19. And one of the main challenges they had was how best to confirm that these people, they have COVID or not. So in the testing modality, first you have to use the rapid test kits, and then you have to confirm by the PCR. Well, it was sad that test kits that were coming from different angles. There are test kits coming from China, from America, from India. And they reported about 25% discordant about these test kits. And this echo what the previous president said about maparachichi, I think mafenesi, mbuzi, and what they were reacting positive, questioning the validity of the test kits. So what we say that at this particular point of view, it's really hard to point out. But always tutasema msemo wa Kiswahili kwamba kwenye msafara wa mamba na kenge wapo. So the question will be, how are we addressing this in our national context? In this particular pandemic, we are not ready. We are not ready in terms of science. We are not ready in terms of the referral laboratory that could actually validate the test at high scientific level with our own Tanzanian context and Tanzanian standards. We are not ready in terms of economy, in terms of diagnosing and treating. So the best way is to learn from this, and this calls actually for industrialization. You know, evidence exists to date. Numbers of paper on COVID and how best we can diagnose that present valuable methods in the literature. One of our researchers in Mbeya actually presented the typical theories on how best we can devise our own diagnostic tool. And that should be the best way for us to prepare for the next pandemic. In this pandemic, we are not ready, and we are lucky that the herd immunity, as Professor Muganyi's mentioned, it was the key savers. And of course, evidence also existed that in the past several years, there were coronavirus waves in Tanzania. We are not sure that there were SARS-CoV-2, which were really cause of COVID-19, but again, that also the scientific explanation of why we were saved by this particular pandemic. So in this one, we are fine. What if it comes the next one? We got to be ready. And the best way is the use of science, you know, what's a national commitment into the science. The other one was when the legal authority, national authority are not there, what do? This question actually reminded me when we were drafting the National Standard Treatment Guideline. In December last year, we gathered at Muhimbili University. And unfortunately, because I was the epidemiologist, we were two epidemiologists, one from the ministry and I, writing the chapter on notifiable disease. And one of the diseases in notifiable disease was COVID-19. Fine. we draft the very good literature on how best hospitals can treat COVID-19. The problem was, should we accept the vaccine? And this was December last year. So the tricky part was, evidence existed that vaccine were, those were the time that Lancet, these high impact journals were giving evidence that vaccine will save, vaccine will reduce hospitalization, and the vaccine will reduce the number of deaths. So the question is, should we put this into the standard treatment guideline or not? And some people wanted to leave the room because they were getting worried. You know what I'm talking about. So the issue is, we ended up actually having a vote. And the very final statement in the segment of COVID for vaccine attributed the technical wording of would and may use the vaccine. So we were avoiding these words like shall, whatsoever, because at the end of the day, as the gentleman was asking, we really thought that science would save us if these things will persist. But at the end of the day, how best tunatetea ugali wetu? And those were the issues. So thank you so much. Sometimes it's tricky and it's a hard question, but at least one have to put these things in the weighing balance and see how best you advocate for science, but in another way, actually you stand for the national policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think on the education part, in second phase questions, you did not get any. Hope so. So the time is not with us. First and foremost, I should emphasize the point that COVID-19 is a fact of life in the 21st century. And secondly, COVID-19 has posed a challenge on survival. You have seen the survival of some of the people in the world, particularly the elderly, those with comorbidities, was somehow shaken. And much more shaken, particularly where the overall density of age of the population was advanced age. The second issue, COVID-19 is politics. There was a lot of politics. You could hear some of the positions of various leaders globally. They've been shaken. Recently, there is that saga in the UK, you understand it. The Prime Minister in the UK attended that party while there was a lockdown. It is a lot of politics. Thirdly, economically, you find there are a lot of issues in economics, from sales of countermeasures, from survival, and etc. All these are economical issues. Industries, some of them were closed. And at one point, I was looking for one of the life-saving medicine, medicine for women, and that is oxytocin. Somehow in our stock we found it was going down. That was a way back in April 2020. I didn't get it anywhere except they overstocked the oxytocin from Burundi. That saved women. Because most of the supplies from developed from India, that's where we get most of the medicines, all the industry were closed and their stock were not sold outside simply because if we are not producing, what are we going to use ourselves? So there are those issues, but also it has been a game changer towards the way we think. I think it has been a game changer towards the way we think. And now, gentlemen here, and even Dr. Simon there, we could hear the traditional medicine. All these are game changers. You could hear the marathon we are having in country in coming up with the vaccine. Before the appearance of this challenge of COVID-19, I think nobody would have thought to go that way. But also, we saw it, in a way, it was a walk-up, saying, don't depend on others. Somehow, somewhere, you need to think about yourselves and find a way of getting your supplies. But finally, this issue of COVID-19, it has exposed the world that it exists in an equitable society. While in the Western world, people are going for the second dose of vaccine, developing countries even getting that the first dose of vaccine, it has been a problem. Because even those donations we have been receiving from outside the world, I'm afraid if they can suffice to reach a population of around 3% or 4% of needed to be vaccinated. So there are a lot of challenges with the COVID-19, but to be sincere, it is a fact of life of 21st century. And I think we need to wake up to see and prepare ourselves as a country how best we can mitigate the forthcoming, the other emerging challenges like these pandemics. With those remarks, I should first of all thank my panelists for preparing. I understand we started communicating a long time. You prepared yourself to come here and make these presentations. I think it was carrying a lot of knowledge on COVID-19, but the message here, COVID-19 has not ended. This is the message I want to tell you. COVID-19 has not ended. We must observe all those countermeasures, especially when you are in risk areas, like overcrowded and etc., etc. Hand washing. By the way, the hand washing, we tried to look at our data on diarrhea, particularly for the under fives, particularly at that time when we were at peak. We found the cases of diarrhea went down. The reason is hand washing. Diarrhea is about fingers, water, fluids, food, feces, flies, and anything that can run around with that contamination cycle can cause diarrhea. But at least we were able to wash hands. And by washing hands, you manage your hands, fingers, you manage if you are contaminated with feces or contaminated fluids. With those few remarks, I should say thank you so much. We will shortly take, I'm reaching to an end. I think you can meet some of the panelists and later on discuss some of the issues. Thank you very much, and now we are closing this session, and we are going for a short for a session for the photograph. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Makuani, our moderator, but also all the panelists for very constructive, discussion, the way. So we really appreciate, and I think they deserve a round of applause. Maybe again. This time, yes, thank you very much. Yeah. So we have a group photo, just one group photo between the panelists, but also the moderator. And thereafter we'll close the session, but also I encourage every one of you who are here just to attend the closing ceremony tomorrow. This is the last day for Research and Innovation Week for this year. So please, we should all attend, starting with ceremony itself. So one photo, one group photo. Nice, nice. You are comfortable? Sawa. So all the all the panelists. Sawa, sawa, sawa daktari. Ngoja apange vizuri hapa. Nawashukuru sana wote kwa kuattend. Asanteni sana. Pata picha moja panelist wote pamoja na moderator, picha ya kumbukumbu. Nashukuru sana. Prof, karibu mbele. Karibu Prof.
so much.